Well, this is a summary of the keynote paper that opened the first international conference on Asian highland natural resource management, otherwise called Asia Highland, in January 2015 in Chiang Mai. Well, the subject that I've been asked to talk about is sustainable agricultural development in the highlands, and in particular, the experiences of the Thai-Australia Highland Agricultural Project. The talk is quite a long one. The overheads have been presented, but in addition to those, there are a few short things that can be said. And so, by way of a preview, so that you have an introduction to what will be said, let me make three major points. The first is that the Thai-Australian Highland Agricultural Project was a small and different style of project. It was research-based. It started on a basis of preconceived ideas for what would suit the highlands of Thailand. Those ideas proved to be wrong. The implementation was flexible enough to change the research that was done, and much research output was generated. The benefits from that project, which was all conducted in the 1970s, were widespread. Many of them weren't predicted in the project planning phase. Many were unforeseen even at the end of the project. Many took place many years later, and many of the outputs were applicable elsewhere in the world rather than where they were done. This is the nature of development research. But one lesson learned from that was that socio-economic research done to understand the development situation is the basis for informing technical research. Nutrition with cattle in the instance that involved me, and from that technical research, development recommendations can be made that are applicable within the social and physical environment of the highlands. But just to jump in with the preconceived idea and implement that in a development project is unlikely to work. That's the first point. The second point is that around the world, the highlands are extensive. About 700 million people live in the highlands. Most of the highlands, of course, are in Asia and Pacific. But then, not necessarily most of the highland dwellers are in that region. What it means is, and this is the second point, that there are diverse experiences that can be shared across highland regions. The experiences haven't been shared adequately because each set of highlands is usually controlled politically by some lowlands. Why is this? Because we are all lowland people these days. The good lowlands provide the food that generates civilizations that maintain themselves by defense or aggression, and therefore have the civilization that can take over or influence what happens in highlands. In the past, the highlands have been refuge for people leaving those civilizations. Today, that's no longer possible. So simply to take technical and social innovations from the lowlands of one country, such as Thailand, and say they must apply in the highlands, is a little naive. The people have self-selected to be in different areas. The environments are different, the climates are different, the soils are different. The infrastructure is vastly different. Yet the similarities across highland areas across the world are underrated. So that's the second point, that diverse experience across the highlands can be shared. The third point is that contrary to much literature, the projects of highland regions around the world have been remarkably successful. It is easy to say that this project had specific objectives, They weren't met, therefore the project was a failure. We can say that about any development project. But when we look back over 40 years, which is what my paper is about, 40 years of experience in the Thai highlands, we can see that amazing successes have been achieved. The development in the highlands can't be attributed to any one project, any one activity, any one research output. But together, these, including infrastructure development, have led to excessive demand for products coming out of the highlands that were unforeseen in the past. And this has occurred not in spite of the projects, but in parallel and sometimes because of aspects of those projects. So these 3 points are the ones that are dealt with in more detail in the paper. That projects have unpredictable outcomes, that there's a diversity of experience around the world, and that there has been amazing success in highland agricultural development. The fact that we are talking about that here in Chiang Mai, with Chiang Mai University hosting a range of organisations from around the world to talk on this subject for the first time, is an indication of the maturity that we've now reached. We can combine information across the political spectrum, across the sociological, environmental, geographical, and the technical science spectrums. This allows us to say, how may the future be better in these highland areas? Thank you. Let me introduce the slides, albeit briefly. The title, Sustainable Development in the Thai Highlands, Some Experiences from the Thai-Australian Highland Agricultural Project, simply represents an approach to using a case study to examine global history of agricultural development projects in the highlands across the world. The highlands share many similarities across the world, yet are often treated separately within national borders or within certain geographical features. In this presentation, I want to make a different approach and to draw out some general points. The first, that there have been various development approaches around the world. The second, that the experiences from these are diverse and useful across other areas. The third, that the Thai-Australian Highland Development Project as a case study provides certain insights, and I use this simply because it's part of my own personal experience. The second thing is that there will be critical elements for sustainable development drawn out through what I say, and I will highlight those points as I go through. And from that, a conclusion about general lessons for the past 40 years is presented. So the highlands around the world are generally viewed in the terms expressed here in the first 4 bullet points. They are said to be inaccessible, environmentally fragile, politically marginalised and culturally diverse. There is no reason for us to disagree with these, but that's a view from the lowlands, and we are lowland people. Another view from the point of view of the highlanders is that it offers freedom from the demands of taxation and forced labour of the lowlands, that is, civilization. And therefore I have another view, which is now is an opportune time to review what we have learnt from highland development. The title includes sustainable development, and here I present a simple definition, which is sustainable development of the highlands simply means guiding enhanced long-term use in a manner that causes minimal negative impact. This is practical. It doesn't aim to preserve environments at the expense of people or to support cultures at the expense of the environment. It's an embracing and multifunctional approach. This is the only way we can look at these environments. And when we look around the world, we can see that there has been much uninformed development. Projects conceived in offices in developing countries or by well-meaning philosophies in small, unsupported NGOs. But really, the best development in our experience has been that which is informed by knowledge, and that knowledge has been generated by research and experience. That experience has to be examined in an objective manner and to accommodate the environment both socially and technically. So where are the world's highlands? This pie chart illustrates that 46% is in the Asia and Pacific region. Developed countries only 8%, which is not surprising. The best agricultural land produced the larger civilizations, and highlands are difficult areas to develop. Countries in transition have 4% sub-Saharan Africa, only 12%, yet very high populations. What this illustrates is that we will learn a lot from developments in the Asian highlands. The second lesson I will bring out is that there are diverse sources of relevant knowledge and experience around the globe. The Ethiopian highlands, for example, support dense populations reasonably sustainably and have done for 2 millennia. These experiences offer something across other areas, including Asia, and vice versa. Experiences from Asia may be applicable in Colombia or Afghanistan. But that's not the way information is usually shared. It's usually within national borders of the lowland people expressing the desire to integrate upland or highland people. In reviewing the projects that have taken place in the Asian area, we find conclusions that we must include participatory research, stakeholder engagement, local research, participatory planning, realistic objectives, rapid returns, low labour costs, high returns, and so on. These are idealistic conclusions and not coming from proper analysis. The plans cannot be practical unless they include flexibility to change during implementation. So when we talk about the Southeast Asian Massif, that area in pink on this overhead, we're talking of the contiguous areas above 300 metres altitude across Bangladesh, Cambodia, China, India, Laos, Myanmar, Thailand and Vietnam, an area that supports more than 100 million people. Now when we compare that to the 700 million in the world's highlands, we realise that the population density is not so high in these Asian highlands compared to other areas of the world. Within Thailand, where we are at this moment, the highlands are represented by the north-south steep ranges, mostly between 500 and 2,000 metres in altitude, and separated by the 5 great rivers of northern Thailand, the Nan, the Ping, the Salween, the Wang and the Yong rivers. These drain northern Thailand into the Chao Phraya River that flows out through Bangkok, creating the Great Central Plain that has led to Thailand's wealth. Yet these highland areas were the first settled areas by the immigrating peoples that became the Thai, as they came from southern China. Then looking back across the literature of the past 40 years in Thailand, one could be forgiven for thinking that despite policies espoused by various agencies, some people were seeking sustainable opium production, others sustainable cultures as if we could put people in museums, others sustaining watersheds to protect the lowlands, and then, behind it all, sustainable political control. I submit that this last one is the continuous and overriding influence. Stability allows development. 40 years ago in these northern Thai highlands, there were few roads, very few. Steep walking tracks and mule tracks characterised the region. The trade in opium, guns and jade made it a dangerous place, with opium grown to very low returns for the growers, at altitudes above 1,000 metres in association with corn, which was essential for nutrition at times. Then foreign drug control and alternative enterprises were sought. A lot of information was generated, But what we find is that the corporate memory of research for development is unproductively short in many of these situations. Thailand, joining in central planning, as have all major development areas of the world, including the New World, engaged in a national economic development plan through the Tribal Research Centre to coordinate government agencies. Various projects, in particular the Royal Project, a large project that needs to be examined separately, was supported by some foreign projects through Chiang Mai University, such as that of FAO and UNPDAC, both United Nations agencies, and the Thai-Australia Highland Agricultural Project, the case study which I now mention. Starting in 1976, this was based on a projection that development in Australia could be relevant to the northern Thai highlands. Introduce pastures, raise cattle, make money. A simple Australian formula that proved to be completely wrong because the area of grassland was underestimated and pastures aren't the answer. Better income sources were needed. Importing ideas of problems doesn't work. We need to look at the development situation, the people, and then define technical research that will fit into that environment. The Highland Agricultural Project of Australia looked at applied research for the livestock industry and subsistence food production of hill tribe people in the north. It aimed to train extension workers and increase the capacity of Chiang Mai University to undertake research for the highlands. The central theme was research. This is what produced the benefits that flowed from the Thai-Australia Highland Agricultural Project. They continue to be felt today. 3 general areas were researched: agronomy, dealing with pigeon pea as one of the successful crops. Pigeon pea is only used by poor people. It can be used for feeding animals or for human nutrition. Various agronomy trials, such as mentioned in this overhead. The livestock work, on the other hand, began with socio-economic surveys to determine the reason for keeping cattle. And of course, this wasn't for meat or milk. It was for savings, sacrificial ceremonies, and nutrition in bad times. Sheep, suggested by New Zealanders and others, proved to be totally wrong. The extension of those ideas through the project was successful by linking back through technical research to the socio-economic information. As a research project, it produced more than 100 articles, but that's not the best indicator. The best indicator of success is the development of the region. And what we can see is that development relies on real information from research, and development research relies on an understanding of the socio-economic values and constraints in order to design its technical experiments. This is what the project did. After the project, we can now see that it was small but in a highly charged environment. Border control was an imperative, with the Border Control Police being active and well armed. Drugs made the area dangerous. Middle-class environmental sensitivities were complicating development. Nation building to integrate people who did not know they were in Thailand into the Thai system became an imperative. Ethnic friction, immigration across borders, and gross corruption surrounding the opium trade affected it. The impacts from the project have been felt years later and in areas all around the world, perhaps more than here. Today, challenges remain in terms of foreign misconceptions about protecting hill tribes. Rights are denied for people to enter market economies by those seeking to protect cultures. National governance is much stronger, and commercial development defines most things. Further research and education is needed, but we can say that despite all of the criticism, all of the concern from various studies, that highland agricultural development has been remarkably successful over the past 40 years. So in conclusion, we can say that the long-term minimal impact of resource use needs good socio-economic research a good corporate memory, proper literature review. That building on those, we can see successes in Highland agricultural development that we can expect to continue into the future through organisations such as Chiang Mai University's Faculty of Agriculture, which is one of the strong centres for this research in the world.